I was the sober driver that night. We deplanned it that way because Halloween in our city turns the streets into a kind of moving carnival. Kids and parents on early loops, then packs of 20-somes in rented costumes with plastic fangs and glitter wings weaving between bars. Our friend Erin had a small costume party at her apartment near the Arts District. String lights, bowls of popcorn dusted with cinnamon sugar, a punch bowl with floating orange slices, and a laughable sign that said, "Not poison." I stayed off the punch and kept bottles of water so I could fight people home. It's an easy job in theory. You wait. You stack everyone's coats by the door. You check the street for your car where you parked a few blocks away. And you do laps dropping off friends to their apartments. It's only easy if nobody notices you. We spilled down the stairwell around midnight with the usual messy goodbye. Aaron insisting we take leftover chips. Marco trying to stuff a fog machine into his backpack until we talked him down. Leia scooping candy corn into napkins like it was contraband. The five of us, me, Leia, Marco, Jess, and Ben, cut down the block under a wind that had finally picked up and pushed discarded spiderweb decorations into snarls along the fences. We were a harmless group. Leia still had her paper cat ears on, freckled face painted with whiskers that had smudged. Marco was a cowboy with a hat in his hand and the holster empty. Jess wore a red cape because she said she didn't have time for anything more involved. Ben had stripes painted under his eyes like a football player, though he kept forgetting and wiping one side off every time he rubbed his face. If you asked me later when exactly I first felt watched, I would say it was when we turned off the brighter block and onto the side street where I deparked. There was a car idling halfway down, a shape more than a model, headlights off, just the soft ticking sound of an engine cooling. The street was thin and residential, bungalows with porch lights and skeletons zip-tied to railings. A couple passing us wore robes and carried plastic cups. A guy in a cheap skeleton mask, elastic string, glossy skull face, walked the other way and didn't give us space, forcing us to step around him single file. I remember the smell as he passed, a sharp citrus cleaner trying to cover something chemical and sweet. He didn't look back because it was Halloween. We didn't think anything of the mask. Because it was Halloween, he didn't need to hide. I clicked the fob and our car's taillights winked 2 cars beyond the idling one. "You parked in Narnia," Jess said. She had her cape pulled tight against the wind. When we got in, there was the normal shuffle of belts and bags, the argument over who gets the middle seat, and that brief cozy moment where the doors are shut and you in your own bright pod on a dark street. I checked the mirrors. The idling car was still there. The skeleton mask guy had disappeared behind us. We spent the first 2 minutes debating food. There's a 24-hour taco place just off the main boulevard that's basically tradition after any party. I would have gone there without a second thought any other night. And maybe that's the kind of sentence people wrap tragedies around later. We started up the block. The idling car slipped forward with us, smooth as if we were both joined to the same string. I signaled right, more out of habit than anything, but didn't turn. It signaled too, then corrected when I didn't. "Weird," Leia said, watching the mirror on her side. The lanes opened at the corner and I expected them to pass. They didn't. They stayed exactly 1 car length back, then half a length. "Maybe they want our spot," Ben said. He was scrolling on his phone, half curious. "Then they can wait a lifetime," I said, trying to keep it light. I did something my dad taught me, a cheap test for tails. 3 rights in a row to make a box and end up where you started. It's hard for someone to explain away following you through that. The streets here make it easy, grid stacked on grid. I turned right, they turned right, I turned right again, and it was like we were attached by a rigid bar now. "Okay," I said mostly to myself. "One more." I made the 3rd right. And when we came back around our party street, the car behind us made that turn, too. A beat later, as if they were giving us the courtesy of pretending not to be obvious. "Don't go home," Jess said quietly. She had both hands on the strap of her bag. Her bright cape looked theatrical while she said something that practical, but her tone was flat. Not panicked, not dramatic. It was a logic voice. Don't go home. I put on my signal and didn't use it. I drifted left, then right, brought my speed down to the limit, then slower. The car behind us compensated perfectly, not in a rage, not impatient, more like they were studying what speed felt most natural on us and matching it. I turned the radio off so I could hear the engine and tires. It's funny. The things that matter, the thin, breathy sound of tires on cold asphalt, is a calmer noise than the chunky slap of deteriorated patches. Calm noises help you think. I told Ella to dial 911. The operator didn't sound surprised, which helped and hurt at the same time. She asked for our location, the car model if we could tell, and whether it had followed us through those 3 rights intentionally. We didn't have the model yet. All I could see were low headlights, a small badge on the grille, a windshield with a tin strip. The operator told us to keep moving, keep doors locked, and go to a well-lit place with people. Gas station, grocery store, casino, anywhere open. Do not drive home, she said, the same monotone logic Jess used. If they attempt to get you to stop, do not stop. I'm on the line with you. We debated the closest options. The taco place was busy, but its lot is small and choked with cars like it's designed for fender benders. There's a 24-hour grocery 15 blocks up with bright floodlights and cameras, but it sits in a pocket where the streets go wide and empty at night. I picked a different target, the big casino at the edge of the neighborhood where security rides golf carts in circles, and there are 1,000 eyes and 100 cameras. I told the operator. She said that was fine. People would meet us out front. I had never in my life been grateful for a casino until that second. When we merged onto the wider road, the follower stayed exact. Every lane change, they took it, too. The city reared up in holiday color. Orange and purple lights draped on bushes, inflatable ghosts thrashing in the wind, porch lights flicking on and off in waves as motion sensors tripped. The follower toggled their high beams once, slow, as if measuring our reaction. I kept my face forward and my hands steady at the top and side of the wheel. The steadying was for me. My hands had started to sweat so much that the leather went slick. Somewhere near the freeway ramp, with traffic thinning and the glow of the casino visible on the horizon like a false sunrise, a second shape slipped into our bubble. A person in a costume stepped off the curb and put 2 fingers to their throat like they had something stuck and needed help. They did it right at the cross street where the line of cars was moving just slow enough that stopping would cause a honk storm, but just fast enough to keep me from parsing the expression behind the cheap plastic mask. The skeleton again, same glossy skull. The cape on their shoulders wasn't a costume piece for fun. It was rain slicker material, light catching on it like fish scales. They didn't actually step into our lane, just barely into the gutter, 1 foot on cold asphalt. If I had been driving alone, if it wasn't Halloween, if this person had done that gesture any other night in any other context, I might have stopped. The follower took that moment to close distance. I could see their hood now, the grille pattern, an economy sedan. Dark, maybe gray or black. A badge that suggested Japanese, not American. A sunshade on the dashboard collapsed and shoved down. The kind of detail that sticks with you because it gives a car personality. Don't stop, Leia said loud over the sound of the blinker I'd left on without realizing. Keep going. I kept going. The skeleton figure turned their head as we passed too slowly, like they were giving themselves time to remember us. Their eyes looked black through the mask holes, but that's what cheap masks do. Turn everyone's eyes into holes. The operator told me to signal ahead of time and not do anything abrupt that would cause a collision. She said officers were heading toward the casino, that security had been notified to meet a white compact with 5 occupants on the Horseshoe Drive. Keep doors locked, she repeated. If you're stopped, do not engage. We'll be on your side when you arrive. It took 12 more long blocks. The follower kept one car length between us and sometimes half, like we were connected by a retractable belt cord. When we made the final right into the casino property, they didn't peel away. They followed. The security SUVs were there, orange lights strobing without the siren, two guys in blazers and radios, another in a cap, walking briskly into the wash of our headlights, waving us forward into a pocket. The follower slowed, then ghosted past the entrance in the right lane and went straight. I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until my body did that lock-up thing again and I had to force the air out. We parked in the bright lights like a store display. The operator stayed on the line until a uniformed security officer tapped my window with that small polite knuckle. His badge said, "C. Alvarez, you're the call." He asked and I nodded, and he asked if any of us were hurt, and we shook our heads in unison in that weird human choreography we all do. He asked for a description and I gave him what I had. Economy sedan, dark grille with small diamond pattern, sunshade on dash, driver wearing a mask earlier on foot that matched the one on the sidewalk. He raised his eyebrows at that. "Two of them," he said. "You sure it's not just one guy changing strategies?" I was sure of the mask on the sidewalk, but not sure of the driver. "So," I said, "maybe two. Maybe one with a friend." He wrote as I spoke, then looked at our plates and read them into his radio. It was reassuring and humiliating at the same time to be catalogued. I felt like a child telling a teacher that someone had followed me home from the bus. We went inside the lobby under the lanterns and autumn garlands where bored people in costumes waited for rides. And a woman with a martini glass laughed so hard she hinged backward against a column and spilled half on the floor. Normal world still existed in there. You can feel resentful of normal when your world has narrowed to a single problem. Security had us stand by a coffee kiosk. An LVMPD officer came in 10 minutes later. The kind of 10 that feels like an hour because your adrenaline is draining and your legs are going watery. He introduced himself, asked for the story, again, asked whether we had posted anything on social media from the party that would give away our plan to leave or our route. Asked if we had seen the car in the neighborhood earlier when we arrived. We hadn't. We also hadn't posted much except for Jess, who had put a story up from the balcony at Aaron's place with that exact glitter of the downtown lights in the frame. You could triangulate if you knew how. Turn those to private for a bit, he told her. And she did with hands that shook, he told us that sometimes on nights like these, a pair will work an area, one on foot, one in the car, looking for people leaving parties who have to walk to their vehicles in ones and twos. If it smells like a designated driver situation, that can make it more likely you aren't hammered, and you'll notice faster. So they wait for groups and try to peel one off with a distraction. If that fails, they follow. For what? Ben asked. The officer shrugged in that pained way that says robbery, carjacking, who knows, but none of the good options. Security told us they'd walk us to our car if we wanted to head out. And the officer said a patrol car could escort us to a main road. Do not go home, he said, echoing the operator. If they're serious, home is the last place you want to lead somebody. And if they're just idiots, they'll peel off when you stay in public spaces. We waited 30 minutes watching kids in costumes ride their sleep crash to the floor while adults made small talk into plastic cups. When we finally went back out, I felt the same wrong quiet I'd felt on that first street. The wind had slowed. The skeletons zip-tied to the railings out by the valet lane barely twitched. Security flanked us, one in front and one behind, hands in their blazer pockets like they held something heavier than hands. I eased into traffic, with a patrol car falling in two vehicles behind, lights dark. The plan was to drive to a diner with a lot that backed up to a main street, sit a while, see if anything shook out. Everyone had their phones out, not to film, just to anchor hands. We made it to the diner without anything dramatic happening. That felt like a miracle by itself. The officer parked on the street and came in and got a cup of coffee. The kind of presence that calms other presences. It's hard to describe how jittery your body still feels after the threat seems gone. It's like someone pumped you full of static, and every door chime or ice machine rattle makes your scalp pull tight. We ate fries we didn't want. I didn't drink coffee because my hands were already buzzing. After an hour, the officer said he needed to roll, but he'd circle by a few more times. And he left us with the advice: people always leave in these moments. Trust your gut. Don't post in real time. Don't stop for strangers and masks on Halloween. We left in 2 cars this time. I drove Jess and Leia. Marco rode with Ben because his apartment was closer to Ben's. We decided nobody was going straight home. We'd meet at my place on the north side where there are cul-de-sacs and neighbors who walk their dogs at insane hours and then reassess. It felt almost superstitious to say the plan out loud in the parking lot. We did anyway. I noticed the gray sedan to blocks after we pulled out. It wasn't the exact car from before. I still couldn't swear it was or wasn't, but it had the same small diamond grille, the same low hood, and flat windshield with a tint strip. It emerged from a right turn behind us like it had been orbiting and found a line. I didn't say anything, at first because speaking of fear feels like unwrapping it and giving it weight. And because sometimes you miss things when you've been primed to see them. We made a left. It made a left. 3 blocks later, I was back in the box. Right, right, right. And the sedan did it with us. That same half-beat delay, which is almost worse because it suggests calculation. I said the word now. We're being followed again. Leia didn't make a sound. She buckled herself again, even though she already was. Jess said, "Take us someplace for cameras." I put on my signal for a right and took an immediate left into a gas station with a convenience store that never closes, pulling right up to the doors, so the overhead lights poured across our hood. The sedan shot past and then hit the brakes and reversed slightly like it had overshot by accident. A man got out. No mask this time, hood up, face shadowed, hands out from his sides like he was trying to show they were empty. He started to approach slow, not too slow, just that perfect pace that looks reasonable from a distance and specific up close. The convenience store clerk saw him and reached for the phone. I threw the car in reverse, backed up to make space between us and him, and angled so our lights were in his face. He shaded his eyes and kept walking. He got close enough that I could see his cheekbones, the shine of a scar line under his eye like someone had missed with a cigarette. He put one hand out, palm down like you would to a strange dog. "You dropped something," he said, mouthing it more than saying. He had nothing in his hand. I laid on the horn. It wasn't brave. It was just the simplest loud thing I could do. The clerk flinched. A couple at the pump looked. The man froze for a second. Then he did this ugly thing with his mouth that wasn't a smile and turned away as if he'd gotten a message and left. Not because he'd been deterred, but because his window hadn't opened and he'd have to pick another. He got back in the sedan. It pulled forward and out of the lot. I took my foot off the horn and realized I'd been pressing so hard my calf cramped. The clerk waved us inside and locked the door behind us as if it were a hurricane shelter. He said, "Saw him outside earlier, just milling." He used that word like he'd picked it up from a police show. He called the non-emergency line and gave a description. We waited again, all of us too wired to sit down, standing in this bright convenience store with racks of gum and batteries and disposable lighters, a wall of refrigerators humming like a farm of bees. The world looks ridiculous when you're scared in it. Every normal object feels like an insult. An officer came 30 minutes later, took our statements again, then told us something I think about a lot. There are people who use nights like this like camouflage, he said. Masks, crowds, noise. They test your boundaries to see how polite you'll be while they get close. You did the right things twice. Keep doing them. He offered an escort again. We took it again. We drove to my place in a miniature parade and I parked in the driveway with the patrol car idling long enough for us to get inside. I've never been the kind of person who draws the blinds. I did that night. We all camped in the living room like a slumber party we didn't want. Nobody opened a drink. We watched a bad horror movie on mute. The kind where the monster is a metaphor and the characters keep going into basement. We laughed, not because it was funny, but because it's a relief to feel the shape of a joke in your mouth when you've spent hours only feeling edges. Around 4 o'clock, the officer texted to say they'd driven a few loops and didn't see anything that matched our description circling. He said if we had any footage on our doorbell cameras in the morning to send it in, and he'd attach it to the report. Stay in groups tomorrow, he wrote, which made me think of the day after Halloween like it was a separate holiday. Come down day, the morning when you do inventory of the damage and the missing pieces. We slept in our clothes. In the morning, with that particular morning after light that makes everything look overexposed and harmless, we checked the doorbell footage. At 11 a.m., a car rolled slow past the house and then again at 2:34, lingering long enough that you could see the driver's profile. Hood up. No mask. At 2:40, a person in a skeleton mask walked past on the sidewalk on the other side of the street and stopped at the nearest neighbor's trash can as if to tie their shoe. They looked up at our house once, turned their head like a bird testing angles, then kept going. We sent the clips in. I don't know what would have happened if we had tried to out-polite them into telling us what they wanted the first time. The part that makes this more than a spooky night story happened a week later. A detective called me at lunch. Their voice had that careful nurse vibe that cops get when they're about to tell you something you'll need to sit down for. They said, two men had been picked up across town after trying a similar follow and approach at a shopping center where one had stepped in front of a car with a mask on while the other pulled up behind to block it. The driver had done exactly what we did at the gas station, horn lights into a public pocket. Only she had a dash cam and had clipped the guy on foot's sleeve when he stepped too close. The plate on the blocking sedan had been captured. One of the men had a healed scar under his eye. The detective thought it matched our description. They were looking at them for a string of attempted robberies. No successful ones on Halloween, he was glad to say. He asked if we'd come in to view a photo array. We did. It wasn't dramatic like on TV. It felt procedural and annoying, and then suddenly very heavy when you put a finger on a face and say yes or no to the kind of question that can sit on your tongue like a brick for months if you get it wrong. Leia cried afterward because the act of pointing at someone and saying, "I think that's him," made all the small choices we'd made that night feel enormous by comparison. We went for coffee and sat in our normal seats with our normal mugs. And every time the door opened, I felt my back go rigid the way your body does when it expects a repeat. We heard later that the two men took pleas on lesser charges tied to the other incident where there was more camera coverage and an easier timeline to prove. Our clips were supportive, which is such a dry word for the way your stomach folds when you watch a skeleton mask pause at your neighbor's trash can and turn their head toward your house. The detective told us they believed the pair had worked Halloween as a cover 1 year prior, too, but nobody had quite gotten a plate before. I don't know if that's true and I don't need it to be. It's enough to know that we weren't the main characters in their story. We were simply available. I changed a few things after that. I stopped posting anything in real time, even a harmless photo of a drink on a table, because a corner of a neon sign can tell someone with the right eyes exactly which bar you're at. I moved my car keys to a hook by the back door so I didn't have to go back through the house to get them if I'd forgotten them by the front. I started doing small, boring safety things with religious consistency. 3 rights when I'm not sure, a lap around the block if I think I'm being dramatic. No stops for anyone in a mask, even if they're doing the universal gesture for choking, and I could be the hero in a story instead of the wary adult in a boring one. There are better heroes out there. Security guards in blazers with radios. Clerks with a phone and a locked door. Officers who drink diner coffee at midnight on a holiday because they know what people use holidays for. I add myself to that system now. I don't pretend I'm separate from it. If you want some climactic moral, I don't have it. We didn't outsmart anyone. We did not bravely confront a man in a parking lot and wrestle them to the ground. We didn't even get the dramatic catharsis of lights and sirens at the curb of our house. What we did was make a series of decisions that felt small in the moment and turned out to be the only ones we needed. Stay together. Stay visible. Trust the ugly feeling. Go where there are people. Ask for help. Do not be polite to someone who wants you to hand them your safety like a gift. On Halloween night a year later, we went to errands again. Fewer people came. We left earlier. I parked closer. The streets looked the same. Webs peeled off fences. Leaves scudding. Kids in costumes practicing their grown-up voices. We did the same walk to the car, but this time all of us were quiet as we crossed that darker block, and I could feel our heads tilt in the same animal way, scanning. When a guy in a werewolf mask brushed close and muttered, "Sorry." My body did that cold tremor inside the bones that it did last year, and then I watched him hand a dropped wallet to a woman and walk on. It's a relief when a mask is only a mask. It's not always that way. We still went for tacos. We ate them inside with the fluorescent lights making everyone look a little sick. And we laughed at nothing in particular until it sounded real. On the way home, we did not see a follower. Or maybe we did and they were just a person going our way. It's hard to know the difference anymore, and maybe that's the point. The edge where your instinct saves you and your paranoia wastes. You can look almost identical when you're driving under a full moon with your friends asleep in the back seat and the radio low. What I know is this: the worst kind of story leaves you alone at the end, and the best kind leaves you crowded by ordinary kindness. Security officers and blazers, a clerk who locks a door, a bored cop with diner coffee, friends breathing in the dark of your living room because it feels safer than breath alone. We got the second kind. Sometimes realistic and terrifying is also a little bit lucky. We took it and went home when the sun was up. We pulled the blinds anyway. We slept. I grew up learning how to cross a yard without looking left or right. In Ashridge, our mill town with the river that always looked like it was holding its breath, I spent my holidays bouncing between Grandma Ruth's bungalow and Aunt Tess's shotgun house. They were two houses down from each other, which sounds simple until you know what sat between them. A sagging duplex owned by Miss Constantcade, a towering woman in mud cake boots who polished her siding with vinegar and muttered scripture at kids like myself. If you timed it right, you could pass while she was scrubbing. The smell grabbing the back of your tongue, the sound of her rag rasping aluminum like she could erase what was written there by God. Don't gawk, Grandma would say. Just go on. And if Aunt Tess was the one sending us, she'd add, hustle. Hands in your pockets, eyes on your feet. People like to pretend it happened all at once, like a switch flipped, and that's when the bad thing began. But that's not how it works. It's a slow creep. A handful of small choices that start to rhyme. Which porch you cut across, which gate squeaks, when you stop telling the grown-ups certain parts of what you saw. By the time you realize those choices connect you to something, you're already in it. You've already crossed the yard. On Halloween, the year everything came apart, my cousins and I were rounding the block in dollar store masks with pillowcases we insisted on calling sacks because it sounded tougher. The mill had shut down the day shift early, and the steam whistle blew in the afternoon, a long flat note that made all the dogs bark. Cold had settled in with the dark. Ashridge does that in late October. The sun drops like a coin and the blue turns to black all at once. House lights snap on down the street as if they're copying each other. Porch bulbs glow like watchful eyes. We ran the distance between Ruth's and Tessa's like we always did. Knees high, breath puffing white. We didn't talk about Miss Constantcade, not out loud. You don't point to a thing you're hoping won't point back. We reached Grandma's with a haul you could live off for a week, and while the adults were sorting in the living room, checking for tampered wrappers like that was the danger, they started reminiscing about trick-or-treating back when. That's when my cousin Louise made the dare. He had a little gap in his front teeth and always stoked the fire. $10 each if we ring Kincaid's bell and say trick or treat. Miss K loud. You got to say the K hell no, said my sister, who liked to sound tougher than she was. $10, he sang, already counting it in his pocket. Cash money from my stocking fund. It was a stupid dare, which made it irresistible. We were half wound up on sugar and half on the thrill of being big enough now, nearly teenagers, to put our feet on a porch we'd avoided our whole lives. The adults were 3 beers into their own holiday. Uncle Marco, Aunt Tess's husband, was telling the story of the time he got chased by a rooster. Laughter was a warm wall behind us. We slipped out the back door because it made us feel like we were doing something serious. The duplex cut its shadow across the narrow yard like a bad hand laid over your mouth. The porch sagged. One of the rails had a crack spidering down it. On either side of the steps, raised beds made out of stacked pallets held late tomatoes, their vines limp in the cold. The dirt was heaped high and tidy, a home volcano. It had that loamy just-turned look, the kind that clings to boots and dries and flakes on your carpet. Vinegar stung my nose. Yo, Louise said already halfway up the steps. Candy is candy. Don't, I said, because you have to be the one who says don't, even if you don't mean it. We were all looking at the door. It was painted a flat, stubborn green and had a little square of glass up high. Privacy glass with a wired net like an old school window. Someone had scrubbed circles around the knob so hard the paint had a different sheen there. Luis reached. The bell was a brass button with a crack through it. He jabbed it. Somewhere inside a buzzer tried and failed to be musical. Nothing. He jabbed again. That was enough in my mind. They're done, we said the K. We could back away now. Spend our $10 on cheap fireworks at New Year's. But then we heard the frantic banging from inside. Not footsteps, not a shuffle. The banging of things being pushed out of the way fast. The kind of sound that says someone had been waiting for exactly this and couldn't get the door open quick enough. A body colliding with furniture. A chair skidding. A table leg knocking. I tasted metal in my mouth. Luis grinned because he didn't hear what I heard. He was listening for the story he would get to tell. The wired glass went dark, a shape filling it. The handle rattled like someone was on the other side with a handful of spoons. Then the deadbolt turned and the door swung open hard enough to bounce on the chain. She stood there like she'd grown out of the hallway, tall and broad-shouldered in those mud-caked boots, a streak of vinegar across her forearm where she'd wiped her mouth. The blood is on your heads, she said, and she was smiling a smile that didn't move her eyes. In her left hand, low against her side, she held what I thought was a Halloween prop until my body told me different. Skin the wrong color, hair matted but clean like it had been combed. Too much, a mouth that didn't open, teeth soft looking like they were made from chalk, eyes that didn't have the living shine. The neck didn't end in a flat fake edge. It ended in something too complicated for my brain to let in all at once. The smell wasn't rot, it was copper and something sour, like a penny dipped in vinegar. I ran first, there's no pride in it. I heard someone scream, not her, not this time. And I watched my feet take the steps at a time like they were attached to someone else. I felt the porch give under me the way old wood does when a big person steps close to you on a bus. I remember the air on my teeth. I remember my hands slapping my thighs as I pumped them. We crashed through the gate and sprinted the strip of grass to Grandma's back door. Behind us, the buzzing sound went again because someone's elbow hit the bell as they fled. It kept pinging as the door swung on the chain, which felt funny later when we told it, like a joke we were trying not to tell on ourselves. We broke into the kitchen like deer. Candy spilled across the linoleum and fanned in skitters all the way to the cabinet topic. The adults stood up fast, moved by that instinct I understand now, but hated then the one that checks for blood and broken bones before believing your words. We talked over each other. We put our hands out to show they were shaking. We said she had a head, a real one, like a real head. We garbled it because once that word was in the air, It made us all try to take it back. It only took a minute for the grown-ups to decide the most comforting thing they could decide. It's a prop, Aunt Tess said. She wanted it to be a prop, so it was a sick joke, Grandma added, which put it in a category of things that happen in the world, but aren't your problem as long as they over there. Uncle Marco was already halfway to a laugh. People do all kinds of stupid stuff on Halloween, he said. You can buy those at the farm store now. It's nothing. Nothing. It was a big word to put on something that still made my hands shake. But once they said it, it gave us a place to put the moment. We shoved it in the cabinet with the sacks and the roast pan and closed the door. We breathed. We told ourselves we had overreacted. We watched the movie on TV, the one with the immortal slasher, and pointed out the fake blood. They put out cider. They told us to talk about things we understood. We were fine if you do, and count the way I could feel her boots on the porch boards every time. The house settled. Weeks passed like that as the air got thinner and sharper. The mill did what mills do in the cold. Steam rose. Half the windows stayed lit all night because a small town's economy doesn't have weekends. The duplex shortened the daylight no matter when you walked by it. I dreamt of that wired glass the way it went dark. Every time I crossed between Ruth's and Tess's, I kept my sightline on the joint where the sidewalk seam ran straight to our back fence. I didn't look, but I felt when she was out there, the way the side yard would go quieter when she was near. The way animals notice things before we do. Squirrels freezing. A stray cat staring at a point on the ground and then stepping away like it didn't want to offend it. Do not engage. Grandma told us that Thanksgiving, when we were tripping over each other in a house too small for that many bodies. It was snowing in pieces here and not here, she said it while she put the rolls on a rack. Soft thing in a hard motion. If she says something to you, you keep on. If she looks at you, you keep on. She talks at me, my little cousin Dina said. She whispers like she's in church. What does she say? Dina shrugged. Kids shrug when they don't have the words. Not for me, she said finally, which shook down things I didn't have names for either. We ate, we squabbled, we napped off turkey. We cut through that yard every time we had to. We noticed new things and pretended we hadn't. The soil in her raised bed stayed loose and mounded even as the frost came. She planted nothing that could survive winter, but still rad and padded as if seed were asleep and would wake when it was ready. I found small bones in the top layer once, white and delicate like the end joints of chicken wings. Raccoon, Marco said when I showed him. He didn't look very long. The vinegar smell never left. She scrubbed it in the cold with her sleeves shoved up to her elbows. Lips turned blue. Scripture came out of her like something she was chewing. Pass over us, she would say at the siding. Like she was giving the house instructions. 2 weeks after the holiday, Aunt Tess's baby was cutting teeth and not sleeping. I know this because the whole block knew it. The way a baby's cry travels through wood and whirring. Tess had started keeping the diaper bag by the front door, a habit she never had before. She became the kind of person who checks the weather on her phone and lays the baby's coat out the night before. On the day it happened, she had the baby on her hip and her keys in her teeth and the diaper bag bumping her thigh on its long strap. She parked at the curb because her little driveway was half ice. This detail matters because it meant she had to pass closer to Miss Kincaid's yard on her way and then she would have if she could have pulled right up. When Tess tells it, she says the air went weird in that exact little strip between the sidewalk and her porch. Dead quiet, she says she realized she couldn't hear her baby for a second because the baby had stopped to listen. 2. A shadow dimpled the light at the edge of her vision. She thought it was a branch dropping with ice. Then the world tilted. Miss Kincaid came from the hedge with something held low and hidden, quick for a person that size. My aunt didn't know she had a weapon until the loop of it closed around her throat and bit. Not wire like you picture from a cartoon line drawing. Not smooth. It had teeth. Later at the hospital, one of the nurses said the word for it like Tess should have known it. Something you Goodbye for camping to saw through branches. The first jerk cut Tess deep so fast her brain didn't understand why her body went hot and wet. The second jerk took her to her knees and turned the world to stars. The baby slid down her hip and screamed for both of them. She told me later her first thought was stupid. It was that she had to keep the buckle of the diaper bag from catching because she loved that bag and it didn't deserve to be scratched. If you've never been afraid like that, maybe you'll think it's silly. If you have, you know, your brain grabs anything that isn't the teeth around your neck. The thing I can't shake is that Miss Constantcade was saying something while she did it. Not cursing, not grunting. Scripture. Regular as breath, for the wages of sin is death. While she reeled them in like she was pulling a net, Tess scrabbled at the wire and felt the teeth. Little notches meant to eat whatever they tightened against. She ran her hands down the loop and came up with blood and fierce new panic at how slick it made everything. The baby's cry somehow cut through. It's the sound that called the house. Uncle Marco was halfway down the hall when he heard it. The cry he was wired to hear, and by then he was already moving. He hit the front door so hard one of the hinges already loosening lifted out of the wood and sat back again. He didn't clock Miss Constantcade at first, because the scene rearranged things he understood. Tess on her knees had pulled back at an angle that made no math. A glinting loop at her throat slick and black in places that should have been red. The baby on the concrete in her winter suit, wailing like it was trying to fill the whole street with sound. A big woman in mud boots with both hands in play, pulling. Marco grabbed the first thing on the hook by the door. It was the cast iron poker from the fireplace. Heavy at the tip and ugly from years of coal fires? He didn't aim. He didn't think about force or angle. He swung like he was trying to break the night in half. The poker rang against something. It still makes me flinch when I think about the sound, and the loop jumped open for a blink. Tess slumped forward and coughed blood on the concrete in a way that didn't sound like a cough. Marco swung again. The second hit connected with Miss Conancade's forearm because a bruise the color of eggplant bloomed there later in a photo we weren't supposed to see. The wire dropped. It fell at the same time. Marco yelled without words and reached for his wife. The baby hiccuped in terror and then found another gear. Neighbors' lights flicked on like dominoes. The sound of heavy boots running on an old porch finally happened again, only this time it was ours. I got there after the worst moment, which is luck I don't pretend to have earned. When I came around the corner, the street was full of people who didn't know how to hold their hands, arms out, then pulled in, fists clenching and unclenching like they were bracing to punch air. Grandma Ruth was in her robe in the yard. She had salt in her hand because she was going to thaw the step. An absurd detail that sticks because my brain remembers things it can smooth its thumb over. Tess sat hunched on the bottom step with the baby in her lap. The cuff of her coat was sobbing blood. The cut was deep enough we could all see it was going to be there forever. Marco stood over her with the poker still raised, its tip bent now from the first strike. He was shaking the way a car shakes when it idles to low. Miss Constantcade had backed into her yard, panting, her eyes bright and alive like this was play. When she saw all those porch lights turning her way, she lifted her hands like that made it formal and walked herself backward to her door. "The blood is on your heads," she said again, same cadence as Halloween. She closed the door before anybody reached her. "I won't tell you we handled it perfectly. Somebody ought to have done more than stand there and bleed into their cuffs. Somebody ought to have kicked her door in, or so it felt then. The truth is, fear and disbelief make you bad at heroics. What we did was dial all of us, as if the number would answer faster if we multiplied it." Marco tried to push his hand against Tess's neck without making it worse. The baby's scream exhausted itself into those tiny, hiccuping grunts that come after when their bodies keep reminding them to be scared. I felt vinegar in my mouth, like breath you catch from close talking. Somewhere a dog barked itself hoarse and then shut up because it knew the shape of the new world before we did. When the police came, The night got more complicated and less dangerous at the same time in that maddening way it always does. Red and blue brushed the duplex into something that looked gentler. Miss Kincaid let them in quiet, the chain on the door slack like she had forgotten she ever used it. She went with them like it was a dentist appointment. She wore the boots. Scripture came out of her in a steady braid. So steady, one of the younger officers said, "Mum, can you stop?" And she said, "No," like she couldn't change the channel. A paramedic called Tess's cut clean because saying clean about something that wrong makes it manageable. They wrapped it and warned everyone not to look at it in the bathroom mirror for a few days. They said things like, "You were lucky your husband was home and it missed the big ones," as if luck were a thing you could count and spend. Luck was Marco on the other side of the door with a bent poker. Luck was the baby in a thick winter suit. Luck was a neighbor who heard the change in a cry. They took Miss Kincaid away without a struggle. She kept talking, and after she passed the porch light, I stopped trying to make out the words. Those particular ones weren't meant for us. They were meant for whatever place she had in her head where she could hold our family in a net and pull. The street waited until the tail lights turned the corner, then let out a breath no one realized it had been holding, but the breath didn't go far. It turned around in a minute and came back because the ambulance was still there, and because the duplex remained, and because fear settled in like new furniture, wrong at first, and then so correct you can't remember the room before it. If that night was the moment, the story got loud. What came next talked in a whisper designed to carry. The police went back to the duplex with people who wore jackets from different departments. They cordoned the yard with tape like the movies, except the tape only kept out people who cared about tape. They asked Marco to describe the weapon, and he kept trying to say it was a wire, and they kept trying to say it was a saw. And after a while, those words didn't help each other. They took the poker, too. I watched them put it in a big zippered bag like it had a disease. Then I watched one of the officers confer with his partner and unzip the bag just enough to take the poker back out and hand it to Marco. "Keep it," the officer said, quiet, convincing himself as much as us. "It's your house." That's how it ended up on the hook by the door, where we could all see the bend at the tip like a question mark. They went into the duplex as if they were stepping on ice. Careful and testing. The first day, they were in there until dark. The second day, they brought a man with a camera and another man with a drone on a string that went into the crawl space and hummed like a big fly. They took turns coming out to stand on the porch and breathe in the open air like they'd been underwater. On the third day, they came with shovels. I want to be careful how I tell the next part. It isn't a story. It's the part of a life that shouldn't have to be spoken out loud. But if I don't, then what we feared stays private, and it shouldn't. They found pallet Brackhurst crawl tunnels under her house that veered toward both family homes. If you don't know what that means, it means the hollow places under her floor didn't end under her floor. She had built them out like hallways, using pallets stolen or scavenged, painted numbers still on the wood from shipments that came through the mill, and she'd packed dirt into cut feed sacks and used those to shape the turns. The extra soil had to go somewhere, and it had gone into those raised beds, tamped and raked and patted until it looked like a woman who couldn't stop being tidy. The tunnels came up shallow under the ground near our fence and near Tess's step, as if she planned on making little doors there later. They were careful telling us that part, but we understood from what they didn't say. Our houses had been added to hers in the dark, and the only reason we knew it now was because a line snapped and let the whole thing go slack. Some things they told us straight. There was a candle-lit hollow arranged like a shrine, the word they used because nobody knew a simple name for a room with so many pictures and bones. The candles were the skinny kind from the grocery store, saints with flaking labels. The glass smoked and stuck to the plywood floor by melted wax. The pictures were of people we didn't recognize, which is somehow worse than if we had newspaper clippings not current. Obituaries folded small, lost cat flyers, hair combed smooth and braided around nails. Names written in a hard hand low on the wood where you'd have to kneel to write them. a line made in ash along the floor like the border of a country, and human remains. They said it like that because science has its own way of keeping a respectful distance. They were careful, like I said. Every sentence had a qualifier appearing to be thought to be likely pending. But the world past the yellow tape knew what it knew. You can't keep the particular chill of a block that has bones under it from moving through your jacket. When they condemned the house, the notice went up crooked on the doorway and then straight because somebody with a square in his pocket couldn't stand to see it wrong. Miscommunicated was taken away. Another phrase, our street made up to put a wall between ourselves and what happens next to people who do certain things. We watched the duplex board up and go blind. We watched crews come at it like it needed to be exercised. Men in masks carried out pallets and set them down on the grass as gently as groceries. When the trucks drove off, they left tire tracks that filled with small standing water and froze at the edges. That winter, the raised beds sunk a little at the corners as the ground settled. Rita from up the block planted marigolds there in the spring because she said the roots were good at singing to the dead. I didn't argue with her even though the science teacher in me wanted to the way I argue with a sneeze. Ashridge has its ways. We narrowed our lives. It wasn't a discussion. Locks we used to ignore got felt twice then 3 times. A night chain appeared on Ruth's door that she could set with one hand. The windows that used to be open a crack stayed shut. The bent poker took its hook near the door where all the coats hung. When I stayed at Grandma's, part of the bedtime routine became seeing it. You'd turn on the porch light, make sure the wood pile was stacked, glance at the hook, then shut the light off in 2 steps, off on off like a blink to some old god. Marco set new screws in the hinges and swapped a hollow core door for a heavy one. He left the old door out back in case the baby wanted to play surface one day, and then never once wished he had kept it. We had to pass the duplex in daylight. Of course, errands didn't root themselves around it for us. The boards over the windows weathered to silver. Somebody spray painted a curse there once, and somebody else cleaned it with vinegar so hard you could see the scrub marks in the wood from halfway down the block. Every time I walked past, I heard the sound from Halloween, the frantic banging of someone making a path to a door. It took me a long time to admit that what she thought she had been doing all along, making a path between homes. Halloween's got strange. The first one after we left the porch light off and felt guilty for it. The kids on our block didn't come around much anyway because word spreads invisible from face to face. We bought the candy and ate it ourselves and told stories low and fast, each of us trying to calibrate how much to say, in front of which children. In the years after, we did leave the light on because 1 year of dark is a surrender and 2 is a habit, and we didn't want our house to forget how to welcome. The doorbell went in awkward spurts. We gave away too much chocolate to each kid so they wouldn't linger. We pretended with the unsteady laugh that belongs to new widowers and people who've had just gotten back a clean scan. Miss Constantcade took up a lot of space, even gone. We developed superstitions like blisters around her absence. You didn't leave a laundry basket at the top of the basement stairs anymore because the shadow it made from the kitchen light could look like someone waiting in the corner. You didn't speak scripture in the yard out loud because it felt like feeding a thing that had learned to answer. Marco carried that poker around the first few evenings as if he were learning a new limb, setting it near whatever room he'd be in for more than a minute. It clanged once on the tile, and the baby laughed, startling us with how clean the sound was after so many ugly ones. I grew up in the way kids do in towns like ours, all at once and not at all. I left for a while like you're supposed to, and I promised myself I wouldn't tell people from other places the story because I hated seeing their faces go from polite to hungry to sorry to a little entertained. That's not what I needed from it. I wanted a clean edge I could draw around it and label. Then life didn't give me that edge. It gave me the reflex. A porch light snaps on and something in me ducks. Even if I am on a stranger street in another state and there's no duplex knitting in the dark between houses. A baby coughs in winter and I find my feet carrying me to the door before my brain even finished the thought that it's none of my business. When I visit home, my hand finds the poker on the hook before I pour coffee. It's a metal question I answer with muscle. A year after the excavation, they tore the duplex down. We didn't go watch. It wasn't an event. It was an adjustment, like having a tooth pulled. Tina from the corner sent us a video anyway, recorded from across the street. The machine put its mouth on the roof and chewed. The house folded on itself with a patience I didn't know wood could have. Dust went up and the sunlight did that thing it does through debris, making little angels for people who need them. In the video, you could still hear the mill 3 streets over, the hydraulic pumps that never die. The dog in the yard watched with quiet eyes. When the machine finished, the lot looked like a day after a haircut. Wrong at the edges, better for the heat. They tamped it flat and left it like that for months. Open and honest, a fresh scalp. Grass came back in clumps that turned to waves if the wine was right. If this were a different kind of telling, I'd deliver you an answer right here. Why she did it, how long she planned, what the names were on the wood, and whether any matched any missing notices 20 miles either way. You can go on the internet and teach yourself to want answers that match. What we got was the reality we live with, the list that begins and then stops. She is gone. They took her away. The duplex is gone. The tunnel mouths looked at our houses once and came up in the dark. Human remains were found. The wire had teeth. Tess survived. And the scar lifts an inch when she laughs hard because that's how skin learns to drape over memory. The poker on the hook is bent like it bent itself that way from knowing us. Sometimes when I visit, we do the old circuit without trying. Grandma's first, then out the back. Cut across the place where the duplex used to cut across us to Tess's narrow place with the tidy stripes in the rug from the vacuum. There's space there now, which ought to make it easier. It doesn't. Absence has weight, too. My feet still want to run the little distance between the 2 houses, because the part of me that knows running kept us alive. That Halloween hasn't aged as fast as my bones. On the new grass in the summer, you can see where the raised beds were. Even after they graded it, even after the rains, the land remembers how it learned to hold what was dug out of it. Every so often, I'll catch a breath of vinegar on the wind near Ruth's back step. There are ordinary reasons. The cook down the block makes her own salad dressing. Somebody's washing windows the way their grandma taught them. But the smell arrives with a shape. Sometimes a big person's silhouette on a porch. A rag in an oval motion that never stops. Scripture folded into in and out breath. And I feel the yard grow long and my mother's voice rise in my head. Don't gawk. Don't engage. Keep on. The light over Tess's door is on a motion sensor now. It comes up like a surprised eye when anyone crosses the walk. You can't stand there without setting it off. It's become a proof of life, a way of measuring what we let ourselves know by what we cannot help but illuminate. On Halloween, we boil cider on the stove and leave a bowl of candy by the door with a note that says, "Take 2, because trust is a muscle and we're working it." Tess stands on the steps with a baby now grown into a kid tall enough to lift the latch herself. They watch the street. They hold their jackets closed at the throat without meaning to. When someone comes up the walk, the light wakes, and our bodies flood themselves with something old that we've learned to call normal. We say Happy Halloween the way you say bless you after one sneezes. An old prayer cut down until it's only the parts that fit in a throat. People move away. People move in. The new folks hear the outline sooner or later. Someone mentions the house that is ain't there the way you point to a missing tooth with your tongue when you smile. The story gets told again, and every time it does, it changes shape like a muscle learning to carry the weight differently. Kids try to fit their own fears into it because it's the largest shape in the room, easy to use as a coat rack. We correct what we can and let the rest be. The worst part, we say, wasn't the head, though in some tellings, it's the first and last thing. The worst part wasn't the wire in the teeth, and the way the doctor used the phrase, missed by a hair, like the hair hadn't been all over the floor already. The worst part is the way we learn to run between houses in a straight line without looking left or right. And how even now, when the light snaps on, a part of me flees before a part of me can stand. To summers after they tore the duplex down, I took a morning walk early enough to miss my eyelashes. I cut across the lot because that's what we do now. We don't seed ground. The grass had come in thick. There were footprints from a raccoon tracing the fence line in little hands. I stopped near where the raised beds had been and looked down. The dew had settled heavier there, the way it does over hollows you can't see. I crouched and pressed my palm to the ground, and it was warmer there than the rest, the sun just catching it. I don't know what I was hoping to feel. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I stood and turned back toward Ruth's, and the motion light on Tess's snapped on as if it had felt me think about leaving. The bulb hummed. The metal shade held a little heat. The porch lay in its clean square on the grass, a bright invitation. I went in for coffee. I washed my hands at the sink for longer than the soap needed, and then longer still, because it felt like watching someone walk you home. When I dried them, I glanced toward the door. The poker hung where it always hung. The bend at the tip broke the straight line and taught my eye to correct for it. I pressed it with my thumb, a habit like people have with wedding rings and scars, and felt the angle that says this is ours now. Even the ugly part, we keep it, we carry it. We learn to be the kind of people who feel for it in the dark and keep going, who lock the doors and still answer the bell so the new kids will learn that a porch light can snap on for reasons that are good. Later that night, the block did the thing it does best and made a minor miracle. The smell of stew on one side of the street found the smell of cornbread on the other, and both came into Ruth's kitchen without knocking. You eat even when you're scared. That's one way home keeps its shape. We laughed. We told the rooster story again. We fussed at each other about who wasn't mixing enough greens into the baby's plate, even though she's too old to be called a baby now. When the sun went, it did that coin drop thing I can't unsee. Down. Bam. The light slicing between the houses as if the day were a thing to be cut. Someone passing in front of the motion sensor on Tess's porch set it off. And for a second, my chest tightened the old way. The light threw its square on the grass. It found no one waiting in that lost space between our doorways. Still, everyone in the kitchen flinched a little, some of us more private about it than others. Then we breathed out like we always do and went back to our bowls. That light will go on 1,000 more times for 1,000 harmless reasons, and I'm going to jump every time. But I'm going to keep walking that strip of grass between Ruth's and Tess's. And I'm going to keep holding myself to a simple ritual off-on-off at the porch. A blink that means nothing to anyone else and everything to us.